In a recent Gartner survey, D&I was reported to be the most important priority for CEOs, and 800 CEOs signed the action pledge for diversity and inclusion. And yet, only 36% of the D&I professionals say that they have been effective in building a diverse and inclusive workspace. In a recent research done by Gartner, they say that 80% of the organizations rate themselves as ineffective in building a diverse and inclusive leadership bench. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Prachi Rastogi and I lead D&I for IBM in APAC. This discussion today, this panel discussion is being presented by VAs and powered by IBM. We have a very interesting line of speakers today. So whether you're a business leader, HR leader, or a D&I professional, we'll take you into the deeper realms of being diverse, equitable, and inclusive. Our topic today is how to find strength in our differences and how to make those around us feel included. So before I take the privilege of introducing our panelists, we'll watch a video of coming together because we at IBM believe that we are stronger together.
The word together could mean differently to different people. The word together actually evokes a feeling of warmth and comfort to me.
Together means everyone feels included, valued, and cherished.
The idea that I can count on people for solidarity.
For me, kotohitanga or togetherness, it's all about surrounding yourself with people who are going to support you no matter what and fill you with aroha, love.
Being together is a long-term project.
Encouraging and building each other up is one of the true signs of togetherness.
It implies that people are mentally synchronized.
Together means teamwork.
আমার কাছে একসঙ্গে কথার মানে শক্তি ও সহযোগিতা.
When you're truly together, the whole is always greater than sum of its parts.
As storms seem like a breeze, alone we can go much faster. But when we are together, we go further.
Coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. And this is the environment that IBM provides.
It is so much more than just a place to excel professionally.
The sense of community we have here elevates every experience.
IBM is the kind of workplace where people will hear you out.
I know I'll always have a safe space to express myself.
I can be myself, others can be themselves, and that's IBM for us.
Being an IBMers is identity for each of us to understand and be inspired by the diverse culture.
In IBM, we work like a puzzle. Each piece is unique and indispensable to make the whole puzzle work.
We can take risks and make mistakes when we know we can depend on people around us. And that is how we learn and grow at IBM.
Together is what makes IBM the best company for working women.
Togetherness at IBM is about co-elevating, that is, leaving no one behind, and co-creating, because together we stand tall, we stand strong. Together we create one IBM.
IBMS की एकता ही सफलता का स्तंभ है.
The IBMers you just met have managed to capture the spirit of our organization.
For us, together isn't just a word but a sentiment that binds us.
There are many things we stand for at IBM: professional excellence, sustainable growth, diversity, inclusiveness, and so on.
The bedrock of this all is our inherent strength, which is built on one simple idea.
We are stronger together. We pride ourselves on the environment we collectively strive to achieve.
Fellow IBMers aren't just colleagues, but allies.
We are part of a community that values mutual respect and empathy.
A community that cherishes being together.
Here's to celebrating
the spirit of coming together.
And remember,
we are
stronger together.
Every time I watch this video, it energizes me fully. I hope you enjoyed it too. And with that, I take the privilege of inviting our eminent panelists today. Our first panelist is Usha Shrikant. She's the Vice President of the IBM Consulting Business in IBM India. She comes with about 25 years of work experience working with various clients on designing their strategy, shaping solutions, and supporting them in implementing the delivery service models. Welcome, Usha. And what stands out for Usha is her fierce attitude on breaking the bias for women and yet not letting women take that as an entitlement. Welcome once again, Usha. Thank you for being with us today. Our second panelist is Dipali Nair. She's the director of digital sales for India, ASEAN, New Zealand, Australia, and Korea. Apart from doing her day job, which she does wonderfully well, she also does a podcast called Being CEO with Dipali Nair. She narrates the acclaimed CEOs, their leadership journeys, their transformational journeys in the podcast. And she's also on the list of the 50 most influential women in India. So welcome, Dipali, to the panel.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
To round up the panel, we have Thiru Nagarajan, HR Head and Vice President of IBM India South Asia, 20 years of work experience across various functions in human resources. I have the privilege of working closely with Thiru, and what stands out about him is the ease, simplicity, and utter intelligence with which he works with people across regions, markets, countries, roles, and positions. Welcome, Thiru.
Thanks, Prachi. Always a pleasure.
So with that, we'll straight dive into the discussion. And the first question for you, Dipali, that what is your message for people who is just starting their journey? And there are many on the call, business leaders, HR leaders, D&I professionals who are just about starting their journey on D&I. What is your message? What are your tips for them?
You know, my biggest tip for people is that the moment we hear the word diversity and inclusion, we always think about including the minorities. We always think about including, gender wise and stuff like that. My first piece of advice to everybody is include yourself. Trust yourself. Okay, it's extremely important to approach this from from the heart, therefore, and be the leader that you are, in that sense. There is a lot of self-doubt that comes in when we're looking at the whole diversity and inclusion piece or empowerment piece or leadership piece, and I think that doubt needs to be removed. And Prachi, as we go on in the discussion, I have several examples to give, but this is what I will leave everybody with. Include yourself.
Absolutely. That's a very important message. Thank you. Thiru, I come to you next. How important is inclusion to you in a corporate setting and why?
Well, I can talk about IBM and my corporate experience. As you know, we're a more than 110 years old corporate organization, global in nature. We've been working on inclusion for all of these decades. It's really not a new concept. Right from recruiting the first African-American woman way back in 1899, or the first person with people with disabilities in 1914, all this was way before any regulation came into play. So it's pretty much in our DNA and our value systems. It's absolutely not only just a business imperative, but we value this as a human imperative for all of us. And truth be told, we all humans come with we all born with a certain bias. We've been conditioned in a certain ways of upbringing. So unless we are extremely conscious, we pretty much tend to lean towards people like us, in any setting, not just hiring people who we are comfortable with, which may be, again, biased towards the, kind of people that you may have not worked with or experienced with. So it's extremely critical that we surround ourselves with the best, put people, who are not like you in diverse teams, because the world is very, very different. So I think it has to start inwards for every leader, every colleague, to work with people who are better than them, not like them, so that they can bridge the gap of what they don't know. So in my view, we got to be very, in every corporate setting and every corporate citizen, we have to be very conscious of our own complexes, and not fear them. In fact, we should embrace diversity, not just from a gender point of view, but have people from all walks of life, all regions, all languages, all races. It's just a fun place to work when you have a colorful environment. Yeah, so we should get to know each other, and that's how life becomes interesting.
Thank you very much, Thiru. And I'll come back to you more because I know you have to leave at 5. You have a personal situation. And thank you very much for still being with us. And before that, Usha, I come to you. How do you respond to leaders and leadership people who say, we just hire, promote the best person of the job, regardless of caste, color, gender? So why talk about D&I?
Prachi, this is like political propaganda, right? So we all think we don't have biases, but the reality is everyone around the world, including you and me, have that unconscious bias. So I think when we hear statements like this, I think it is important not to take it at face value, but probe 2 levels down. And also acknowledge the fact that unconscious bias is a reality. There's nothing wrong about it, right? And as Thiru was saying, how much do we go out in order to encourage people who are different, who are not the same, into our teams? It could be diversity, it could be something else. So I think it is important for us to unveil that bias. And also, unveiling that means we become a lot more self aware in order to say this is a reality, get it out, and then get going. So when people say that, never take it at face value, go 2 levels lower to probe questions, and then say, you've got to do the balancing act, you've got to take the bold move in order to actually practice what you are preaching as, not having any, being fair and things like that. That's what I would call it, Raj.
What a delight to hear that, especially from a business leader. Thank you, Usha. Coming back to you, Thiru, and we'll have a couple of questions for you. What is the most difficult aspect of working in a diverse environment? Since all the companies today want to be diverse, inclusive, what do you think you can tell them the difficulty of being diverse?
Great question. We've come a long way in India, I think, in the last decade, particularly from an IBM point of view. Every year we've made great strides. I would, actually encourage the listeners here to go look up IBM's public diversity report. It's an annual report that IBM publishes where we talk about, the progress we are making quite openly. Yeah, so you must definitely read about it. To the question that you asked, what's the most difficult aspect of working in a diverse environment? To me, you can have a diverse team, but if you don't know how to include all of them, how to work with different people, to be empathetic, and if you are working in a non-inclusive environment with diverse people, that is a train smash. Because in that way, you'll have different people who have different points of view, but if you're not able to digest and have a completely open mindset where you can understand before being understood and have a transparent culture and a very clear inclusive culture. If the culture is not right, diverse teams will make no sense. So absolutely, I think all leaders will have to learn to be able to work with different people. And that's how they get followers, people who want to work with those kind of leaders who not just have diverse people, but create an environment where people can be proud of and feel the belongingness in a team. So employees feel valued for the differences that they bring, and eventually that's how they get productive. So they stay long term, not just in a diverse environment, but it has to be inclusive, and that all starts with the leaders that create that space.
Absolutely. Thank you. Very well said, Thiru. And my following question is that what does IBM stand for women in STEM roles? Do you see that there's a dearth of talent outside in the market, or we need a mind shift change?
Well, I think there is no dearth of talent in India. However, if the way the days when we've all grown up, particularly in a STEM environment, the proportion, I'm referring to gender diversity, will always be 30 to 40% in a classroom. And as you go into engineering colleges, it probably becomes lesser. So the gender diversity in a high-tech environment, just by the design of the students that we we have in colleges and universities today, it just becomes, smaller and smaller, and then the employable population is even more tiny. So we compete for this talent, right? However, um, I do think that we are investing broadly in our societies in the long term. In IBM, we have a STEM for Girls program that's been on for the last couple of years. More than 3.5 lakh children girl children have leveraged this program. About 1,700 schools have been engaged, and I just spoke to a couple of them in our office today. They came to talk about how they are, how they have been able to overcome many of their challenges, and share their story with many IBMers. They were ninth graders from a school in Bangalore, came to the IBM office, took pictures with all of us, and it is brilliant. So I think, in my view, we have a lot of programs to encourage the broader society. Within the organization, we have a healthy pyramid in terms of the at the early professional level. But then when life change, when those life instances occur, post marriage, maternity, children, a lot of women actually opt out. So our message to them always will be, don't check out of your career, take a break. There's always responsibilities, and particularly for the women at the workforce, they carry so much of responsibility, not just at work, but at home, children, education. So you could pause, work part-time, take a break for maybe a year or two, and come back. So we have a lot of programs that enable that. We also encourage, leadership, women to take on leadership roles. So we want them to, not underestimate their ability to lead, because otherwise, in a normal setting, the men always are very enthusiastic, and in many ways they might be half as good as the woman, but the woman pretty much is always reserved. They want to be perfect, to be absolutely sure that they are really good at what they are going to be taking on. So employee confidence, mentorship, and finally, on the ground too, like most companies do have, we've actually coached and enabled the entire workforce. Gender neutral bathrooms, working with housekeeping staff to be respectful to all genders, right? And the entire value systems that we have in IBM overall, in being included, in being inclusive of various segments of our workforce overall. And lastly, we've been very bold externally too, and my two colleagues here are very eminent. We intentionally choose to go out and talk about what we do in IBM, so that the world knows about our practices and our culture within IBM. So we attract candidates so that they know, we've been one of the most admired companies, top employer brands. So we take a very strong stand about fundamental values of inclusion and diversity very seriously. So that's how we live every day.
That's brilliant to know. And Thiru, I may come back to you before you leave at 5. And now to you, Dipali. How am I a beneficiary if I include people around you? Why should I include people around me?
What a brilliant question, because a lot of the times people take it for granted that diversity is beneficial, and Harvard has done a study and it's proven that these companies will do well, and the profitability will go up, and so on and so forth, right? But I just want to give you an example, Prachi, and I think you personally are familiar with this example. But I joined IBM 3.5 years ago, and I joined in as a chief marketing officer. And I had a team where we did have, low morale. Let me just put it that way. And the employee engagement scores, were on the lowest side, if I may say so, right? And I think, when I look at the whole inclusion aspect, this is what I want to say. It's not just about gender inclusion. It's about including everyone. And the moment you have that attitude of include everyone, you start appreciating diversity also, right? So the moment you look at it from that lens, you have to get into the culture and the fabric of the team around you. And we are talking about how does it benefit me, right? And I want to give an example of how it benefited me and how it benefited every member of the team when we looked at this whole piece of appreciating everyone, appreciating every single one, including everyone, appreciating diverse voices, how we dealt even with our partners and vendors. And the work that we did over there for 1.5 years ago, 18 months later, got us the highest score ever in IBM from diversity and from employee engagement perspective, which is a score of 96.4 out of 100. And we were of course green and best in class and so on and so forth. But more importantly, we were winning awards for innovation. We were getting praised from business for contribution, and my team last year got the Economic Times, Best Marketing Team of the Year award, right? So I feel that if you use the inclusion lens, you get benefits for yourself personal. And if you talk to everybody in my team, they will tell you how they've grown in terms of learning, how most of them have a career path, and how they've grown also in terms of their careers. And the fabric of the team has not changed despite the fact that people have moved out and people have moved in. So we've had a constant movement because we're providing growth to them and they are moving to other parts of IBM and growing, right? So this is one example that I always like to give, that, this is what inclusion truly is all about. If you can appreciate everyone and have a place for diverse voices.
Yes, yes, and I love it that letting go of them is also part of inclusion. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes. And Thiru, it'll be great if you tell the audience, and there are many who are listening to us right now, and there are many who will listen to the recording later on. What is IBM doing to include, to let everyone feel included?
Well, we actually do so many things as a way of work, within our everyday lives. Be it from investing in women education, as I talked about in your last question, to from making the workplace easy for every segment to feel comfortable. We are now, coming back to office, surely but slowly. We are now in a completely hybrid mode of working, so we are intentionally flexible. We're actually telling all our employees that don't come to work just to do your everyday stuff, but come to do, it's all outcome driven. So you don't need to come and sit on a desk alone just to conduct some activity, but come to meet your teams. Even if you come to the office, you don't have to work 9 hours a day. Spend 4-5 hours, co-create, collaborate, engage, have some fun, go back home. So eventually flexibility is a big motivator, and it's essential post the pandemic, I'm going to say. Addition to that, we a significant amount of mentoring and career counseling, particularly for teams who have not had the opportunities in the past. So the beauty in IBM is you can pick up the phone and ask for help. Anyone to anyone, you have it. It's the finest of minds and professionals that work here. So you could just reach out to anybody across the world and ask for help. We have specific, I'm going to say, skill sponsorship programs. We've been actually harnessing the power of diversity and inclusion in many projects, and we realize that we may have senior leaders who are thought leaders in a domain, but they're not so I'm going to say that they may not be very very well versed with other topics, where someone from a completely different environment is brought in to come and lead. So I think the culture in IBM is something that we're very proud of. So in addition to that, all our, I don't want to talk about the regular benefits policies, which today are very common for women to work, beyond post-maternity engagement, return to work. In the learning programs that we have, are intentional investments that we make all across all levels of the organization. So we've made it very simple. I feel like it's no big deal because we've come a long way in the way we treat all sections equally in our company today.
I want to add, Prati, I think, it is because it is really part of the DNA here that Thiru is able to say, it's no different and we do it, But I think a lot of organizations may have the intention, but they may not have the right interventions, So I know he mentioned hygiene and policies and things like those, but there are more interventions that need to be done. And Thiru, let me say this. I joined IBM 3.5 years ago, and once you're here, you feel that, all places are inclusive. But it's when you leave or when you've come from outside is when you realize, as I use the term, how gender agnostic it is, And it's not just gender, Prachi, I want to highlight. I mean, you go to other parts of the world in IBM, it sometimes can be about ethnic communities, but, the whole intention of inclusion and then intervention for inclusion, I think, is the important aspect. So, Thiru, I wanted to underline that.
I was going to say that, Thiru, while we think it's basic hygiene, but there are many companies which are starting their journeys. It's so important that you mention those policies. And also, Dipali, to your point, I get about 7 to 8 applications on LinkedIn every week that we work for IBM, we want to come back. So totally with you on that. And with that, thank you very much, Thiru, for your time and presence today. Wishing you all the best and thank you.
Thank you, Prachi.
Usha, I come to you. D&I, in the contemporary world, D&I is the deal maker or the breaker for organizations. So what is that one thing which is a complete non-negotiable for your team, for IBM?
D&I into corporate agenda is like sustainability in the balance sheet today, right? So everybody talks D&I, but do we really walk the talk? Some of us do, some of us don't. I think the non-negotiable thing for me overall and for our organization is making this sound more like an imposter syndrome in order to say, hey, we are also into this act of D&I. That's the part which is non-negotiable. Trying to actually get away from it and say, oh, I've got to do this because there is an impact, and there's not an overall impact, but there is an impact in terms of not following the rules. Therefore, let me promote this woman because I need to be seen as embracing D&I. That's non-negotiable. I think it needs to come from our heart. It needs to be in our culture. And many a time when practically for me, there have been situations as I have been moving in my career where people said, yeah, you know what, I think we need to give you an opportunity because that will be showing our support for D&I. And I would say, no, you will give me an opportunity if you believe I qualify for it. You will not give me an opportunity under the D&I umbrella. And I think that's what is important. And it's not so much about the organization, it's also about ourselves. Don't take D&I as an entitlement. Go ahead and have your enablement, but end of the day, you get something because you deserve it. And it's not because of D&I. So that's what I would call out. Non-negotiable is just having that imposter syndrome and just, talking and practicing. It has to be something that we believe in. That's how I would call out Raj.
Yeah, I love that. And a linked question would be that it's not a dichotomy, but still, on one hand, we see you talking about breaking the bias and talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. And I've heard you on various forums where you are so fierce about not women taking that as an entitlement. So what has been your influence really? What has, why this has been your point of change, point of transformation? Your personal story.
So, what's several times when, the gear has shifted for me in my life, as I look back. And sometimes it's almost like, there's a kid who's told, don't do this, and you go all out to do it, right? It's a little bit of that. When I graduated from engineering and then did my, I kind of came in. It's an experience which is vintage now, but I was an instrumentation engineer. I got an appointment letter after multiple interviews into a petrochemical plant. I won't name the organization. And then there I go for my final interview. And instrumentation is something usually the guys are better at than women because you need to work in shifts and so on. I get into the room of the general manager, and the general manager looks up and says, "Oh no, you are a lady." I was like, puzzled, fresh out of college. I mean, it's obvious, from the name. And the problem was, they had looked at the last name and not the first name. And there was an error where the miss had gone, and, they thought it's a guy. I said, "Yeah, I'm a lady, but I've qualified because I've gone through 3 rounds of interviews." But he said, "No, I cannot give you the job." I said, "Why?" "You've got to work in this plant. It's going to be shift, blah, 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 blah." I said, "But you need to see how I work rather than say it is in shifts." And we went on for half an hour. I didn't get the job, by the way. But that kind of made me take a resolve saying, I'm not going to get anything, I'm not going to lose anything because I'm a woman. I'm going to get it based on my qualification. And interestingly, I went out and pursued a job in another petrochemical plant, which actually worked in shifts. And then later I dropped a note to this general manager saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm actually, working in shifts and I'm doing a good job about it. So that's where, so there are biases, there are various things, but end of the day, I feel very good at heart when people look at me, evaluate me on my capabilities, not because, I'm a woman or something else, right? That's what, and that's always been good because you feel you are being deserving and you're acknowledged for your merits. That's what I would call out, Prachi.
Yeah, absolutely. And Usha, I'm also interested in knowing your story. You're a mother. You've gone through various phases of life that many of us are going through. What has been your personal story with that?
So it's interesting you ask. I mean, I have one son who is old now, so he no longer needs his mother because he's 26 years. Okay. But I do remember when he was growing, it was interesting where I was in a sales job. My husband was in a sales job. I was in a consulting job, and my husband was in a sales job. We would do week one, I would be at home. Week two, my husband would be at home. So weekends is when we would actually meet, and my son would wonder what is happening, obviously, because he never saw I would say the stabilizing factor in our lives was my mother-in-law. So there were many a time, there was the standard thing we all go through, right? So you've got your parent teachers meeting, you're not attending, you're into a meeting, or you're traveling. And my son was pursuing badminton as a sport, playing at a national level. And I could never attend any of his tournaments because I mean, we decided we'll balance. So my husband would travel for tournaments and I would do my son's project work. So anyone who saw this family from outside would think completely, what's this mother all about? To an extent where my son never called me as mom. I was always on a first name basis. But then the relationship, the bond that we share with each other even today is as a friend and not as a mother and son. For the outside world, it may look different, but for me, I cherish that relationship. And I say, you know what? I mean, this is good. This is really good. So many a time when I went through this, there were moments where I would feel, am I doing the right thing? And then I would tell myself, you know what? I like doing what I'm doing, and therefore I will go. I'm not attending this doesn't mean I'm sacrificing. That's because I like something else, I'm passionate, and there is no harm in acknowledging the fact that you love meeting your clients, you love developing a piece of code, and it is perfectly okay to like doing that over and above taking care of your family. And when I look back at my decision, I think we are a reasonably good family in terms of having brought up kids the way they need to, not too much. So I think it's all about, learning to accept who we are, getting your family to accept who you are, and the fact that letting your family know you have your own interests too. And that's what has actually helped me, Prachi. And many a time I would say, my son has come back and told me, don't worry, you know what, if you're at home, it's going to be troublesome. I love the independence in you. I learn from you. And I'm proud, having your kind of a role model as my mother. So just go all out. And that actually, has helped me build that bond and evolve as we go along. So these are things
Every
you discover about yourself.
Yes, yes, and every alphabet you said is profound. But you know what stands out is I love the way you dealt with guilt because a lot of parents, especially mothers, say they're dealing with a lot of guilt because they can't spend enough time with their children. I love the way you dealt with it. Thank you very much, Usha. And to you, Dipali, what is your message? Although imposter syndrome is something that all genders deal with. It's not specific to men, women, or transgender people. But clearly, we see that it gets manifested in women a little more. So, what is your message around that?
Before I give the message, I have to tell you a story. Okay, so this is 2010, not even too long ago. Okay, this is about a decade ago. My boss Joydeep Roy, he was a CEO at L&T Insurance, calls me in and says, Dipali, from now on you have to look after customer service also. I was already doing marketing and digital sales over there, so he said I have to add the third portfolio. You know what was my immediate reaction? And that's where the imposter syndrome shows. It's this sudden moments in life when it happens to you. My reaction to him was, I've never done it before. Well, that was my reaction. Just the worst reaction ever that you can give, to a manager when he's handing over a larger responsibility to you. Can you imagine? But of course, he is the gentleman that he is. And, he looked at me and he says, but I think out of all my senior management team, given that we have a situation, I think you're the best person to do it. And then, of course, within a minute, I spoke about, the team and the size and what it needs to be done. But that was my first reaction. And I look back at that moment and I say, okay, where did that come from? Look at the word choice that I had. I have never done it before, and there is a self limiting belief that I'm not the subject matter expert in this space. Okay. Because before that, I'd done digital sales and marketing, which I consider to be my domain. I had not done customer service before, but I did the job and I got over that syndrome. So today I feel I can lead any team anywhere, and it's about the leadership, it's about the culture and all the other things that we're talking about that also matter. Of course, you've got to pull up your sleeves and learn the new things. I used to actually take customer calls once a week, and the tough calls that I would do. But I think that's where it comes from. It comes at you any point of time. So on this imposter syndrome that you're talking about. And what Usha was discussing earlier, and the guilt bit that you're talking about, it's all a part. There is this whole stereotype in our mind, that I have to be this great cook if I'm a mother. My house has to be perfect. I have to be a great hostess. And how these stereotypes get built. So if my son does fabulously well at school, or if my house is very well turned up, I automatically get the credit for that, Prachi. But like Usha explained, that children are brought up by two parents. They're not brought up by one parent, and sometimes by multiple parents, as I call it. Usha had her mother-in-law, I had my mother at home. And my brother has taken a very active part in honing the values that my son has. So but I get the credit. So the reverse thing also works, by the way. Okay, the reverse
Absolutely.
and the whole imposter syndrome, the stereotype, when I took the break when my mom was unwell, if it had been a guy at the prime point in his career, you're 45 years of age, a guy would be asked, what's wrong with you, what happened, etc., etc. I was not asked all those questions. I was told, chalo acha hai, now you can focus on your personal stuff, or your family. Just look at the reactions around you. So the societal context brings in the guilt, brings in the imposter syndrome. And that is what we've got to rise above. We've got to reflect. We've got to think through all these things that are happening. And, there are biases that exist in our mind, and all of us are victims to that. So today, in IBM, we don't do it. But imagine if I'm putting together an event for plumbers, right? Or electricians or drivers, I am caught in the trap of thinking they're all men. And we, of course, do have examples also like that in our society. Hard pressed to find a woman plumber, hard pressed to find a woman electrician in this society, right?
Yes.
This is what we live with. And
Yeah, the
therefore,
systemic bias.
the systemic bias. Therefore, it is natural. But I think if we are conscious about it, and if we are, looking to rise above it, and if we are reflecting about it, I think is the important aspect.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Very profound. And Dipali, a linked question would be that how, as a mother, have you dealt with things, especially when the child was small and you were at the prime of your career, you were doing so very well at work.
So, there are two, three philosophies that I've kind of, dealt with. And there's been guilt. It's not like, but, how do you get above it? There's been a time when I've gone to, you might have heard of Apurva Purohit. She's somebody I know. And I've gone to her and I said, I feel like quitting. I don't think I'm doing justice to my son. I think I want to be at home. You also have one son and, and her son's a little older than mine. How do you deal with it? And she told me this. She says, today your son is 6, Dipali. By the time he's, 10 or 11, he won't need you. What will you do then? She actually told me this. She says it's a tough time. Just as you say, date raho, abhi karo ek bar. It'll be tough. I think the second thing that you also say to yourself is that at every point of time, every year, you don't have to get the highest bonus. You don't have to get the highest rating at office and at home. You don't have to get an award of being the best mother every year, the best cook every year, the best, whatever at home. I think we need to rise above that and say it's okay sometimes to be 6 and 10 mother. Like I don't know how to cook very well, for example. I'm admitting this over here, okay? But I think it's okay. Usha, when my son turns 26, I don't think he's going to say, "Mama, you didn't feed me well." you know. Okay, children do pile on guilt to you. Why not? I think it's part of growing up. Children will say that, listen, you don't cook well, or you don't do this for me, or you don't buy that for me. It's a bit like saying that you're not buying a toy for me, okay? And there we don't have guilt when we don't buy a toy for them, right? But I think what is very important is that, are your values right? Are you setting the right example as a parent? And do you spend quality time with your child? When I'm with my son, how much ever addicted I am onto the phone, my phone's on the side. I think those are the things we need to look at as a family. What are the kind of conversations that you're doing with your children? Are they purposeful? But very, very important, what is the example that you're setting? If I need my son to be frugal, tell the truth, all the values that I stand for, I can't be going for movies and expecting that my son will not watch them, right? I mean, very small things to say, but I think you need to live the life that you want your children to be. So I think that's been my principle, Prachi.
Love it, Dipali. Love it. Love it. Usha, there's a question for you from the audience. How do I become more inclusive and an advocate for others, especially as a business leader?
So I think this is important, right, as a business leader to be inclusive. And when I really look back, the main thing for us is to practice and set ourselves as an example. So today, when I try assembling a team for a new project, I make it a point to bring in diverse set of people. Diversity doesn't necessarily mean just women or, it's about race, it's about different ways of thinking, because somebody who comes from a tier 2 city via a tier 1, or somebody who's an older person and a younger person often come with a different set of thoughts, and you bring in the diversity into your team. And the second thing is, as you're trying to be inclusive, especially when you have people in minority, could be on, various dimensions, right? It's important to make them feel comfortable initially. And I have been on a global role probably for the last 20 years. But initially, when I got into a global role and I had to deal with the Europeans and the Americans, it's not about whether I knew how to talk good English, but it was more about, in a 20-member conference call, are you able to create the right impact? And I learned from one of my mentors who would always know that here is this woman who had good points, but she would rarely be given an opportunity to talk. And he would always call out and say, Usha, do you have something to add to the discussion? And I would use that and just, race into the conversation. So that taught me that it is important to be inclusive by action. First of all, practice it, be inclusive by action, be sensitive about it. These are, I'll give you again, I come from a conservative family. And initially, when I took to the global role, in those days, because I'm in my 27th year of working, now I was not used to Western casuals. And these are things, guys, I'm just opening up because there are times where you feel it's fine to open up. And I had again someone come and say, hey, when you're traveling, this is how you need to be approaching, especially when you're going for a US client meeting. Now, these are things we would never imagine. And that helped me a lot in terms of, so it was just not about knowing technology, being able to handle, but also, your social skills, the way of dressing and other things. So I think these are again things, it's a little sensitive, but you need to go there, go that extra mile. In a one-on-one conversation, I often tell some of the women saying, you will have to be like the others, right? So you need to be, do what the others are doing so that people are not looking at you as somebody who's the odd one out. So I always
Yes.
try to practice that, go that extra mile in order to see, are we taking care and bringing in that inclusivity. And what you will realize is when you start practicing that, the rest of the team that is there with you, they naturally fall into it. And I've learned
Yes.
it from people who dealt with me, people who handled a lot of these sensitive things for me. I learned a lot. I'm very thankful for them, and I try to return it back in my own way as I groom teams. So a few points, Prachi, that just struck me as you asked me the question.
Absolutely great. And I hope the person who asked the question and many business leaders on the call will learn from it. Thank you. Usha, I have another question which has actually come alive from the audience. Who's your strongest ally? And I have the same question for you too, Dipali. So, Usha, who's your strongest ally and how did you earn that allyship from that person? It could be at home, it could be at work, anywhere.
So I'm going to, again, it's my husband. Okay. I would say he's my strongest ally because, again, we both are management graduates who came out of college and ultra aggressive and wanting to conquer the world. Of course, as you grow old, you realize you can't conquer the world and you bring in. But what I love about is it's not about trying to be sympathetic or empathetic. It's more about saying, hey, Usha, you can do it. Come on, go and do it. It's not that he would take care of things, but he would say, you find your balance, you go and do it. Don't worry about rest of the world. I think he, in a way, has been, I owe a lot to him in order to help shape my thinking and free myself away from the guilt which a lot of us will go through, saying, am I taking care of my home and my office and what? And most of the time, when I see him talk in his friend circles, the pride in him saying, you know what, Usha has done this, feels really nice when his friends come back and tell me. So he's been my strongest ally all through, and I feel very, very grateful about that.
So, did you have to negotiate that or was it a gift?
Actually, I didn't have to negotiate that because, again, when I just look back, ours was an arranged marriage. So normally in an arranged marriage, you're trying to know each other, etc. So the only question I had for my husband was, hey, Shrikant, listen, there's only one thing I need, which I'll be a career woman and I need you to support it. So he knew I really meant that. And I think that set the stage. And he's always been a phenomenal supporter. It's just not in career. It's all through, whenever I have difficult situations, he's there, he's the calming effect. And it works, right? And it really works. So I didn't have to really negotiate it because maybe I made my terms clear before getting into the relationship. I don't know what.
No, wonderful. I mean, you are absolutely clear that he was clear that you meant it. And I hope the men are listening and you will do everything in your power to make a very equal environment at home too, so that women at your home can take expanded roles. And the same question for you, Dipali. Who's been your strongest ally and how and why?
So I want to answer the the why bit first. I think at work when you're looking for allies, and some of my managers, I mentioned Joydeep Roy earlier. I'd like to mention Anita Bogle. She's Harsha's wife. She's been my boss, she's been my manager and a very strong supporter and allies in that sense. Ambi Parmeshwaran, a lot of people know, he's written several books. And a lot of the friends that I made at work, they've been allies. They could be CEOs of other organizations also. Now, this bit about how do you earn the allyship? I think in a work related environment, people would like to be friends and allies to people who demonstrate excellence at their own workspace, from whom you can learn something. Be it, I could be a subject matter expert for them, or I could be a motivator for them, or I could be, a leadership coach for them, and vice versa. I think that's how I at least look at the whole allyship. What do you bring to the table for somebody else to feel good to be in your company, and because these are choices that you make, these are not forced on you. Allyship is not forced on you. And just like Usha mentioned her husband, when she was talking, I was thinking about it. I think it's extremely important with the age cohort Usha and I belong to, given the societal context that we've seen. You mentioned conservative family, that's true for me also. I'm a Marwadi, I don't even need to, use the word conservatism when I talk about it, right? So, when we look at it, I think families needed to be supportive. And in my case specifically, I think it's my mother, it's my brother, and then also my husband. But I think it's my mother predominantly, because I will again narrate an incident. I was at college and you get used to the narrative around you. I was in a German girls' college where if 100 girls entered the college, 50 only passed out because the other 50 got married, right? And there was some discussion about what do you want to do in life. And I said, look, I'll be very happy being a professor also because I love to teach and things like those. And, you get a lot of free time to take care of family and kids. And my mom looked at me and she just actually brainwashed me that day. And she said, look, you're such a brilliant student. This is not what I expect out of you. I'm thinking you will be, in civil services. By the way, I've still not done civil services for her. Okay. You'll be in civil services and, you'll do this and you'll be an IAS officer. I mean, why are you shortchanging yourself? Now, imagine that being said to a 17 or an 18-year-old by her own mother, and setting very high standard at that point of time and saying that, I'm sorry, but you're thinking small. I think that's the important bit. And in different points of time in my life, my mother's actually come to the rescue by, taking over either my son's care responsibility or my household responsibility or whatever. She's extremely committed to my career. She's extremely committed, for example, Prachi, to the fact that I do this podcast. She's extremely committed to me going and teaching at a B school. She knows and realizes that these are things that are, part of my life and persona and career, and they add value, So I find her a very strong ally. But I think it's also extremely important when it comes to family to be ready to ask for help. I call up my brother and I say, I can't do this and you have the skill to get this done for me. So please do this for me. So I think
Yes.
that's extremely important, and they will
Yes.
listen to you when you say that, look, I don't have the time or I can't, or at this juncture in my life, you've got to help me. So I think that's also.
Yes, yes. No, absolutely. I love this point that asking for help is important. Don't assume that there'll be no help available. Absolutely. This sort of brings us towards the end of the discussion. And one thing that I again will ask both of you is, Usha, first to you, that if there's one thing that you leave the audience with today, what would it be out of the whole conversation? And there are many who are just about starting their journey.
I think I would say believe in yourself and be passionate about what you want to do.
Uh-huh. And if you're saying that to a business or the HR leader who's basically trying to get the organization more diverse and inclusive, would it be any different?
So if it's an HR leader, I should say walk the talk.
Thank you very much. Few words, but quite profound. And Dipali, to you now.
To the younger people, I would say have a very big vision for yourself. It's probably a 30, 35-year career. It's a long time. So have a really, really big vision. I think in my case, I was probably, limited by my smaller vision. I wish I had a bigger vision because, whatever I thought about, I achieved in 5, 7 years always, so I always say that. To the older people, I want to say this to successful people, and which is what helped me, I think, at a midpoint in my career is what got you here won't get you there. So you've got to examine the things that may have helped you succeed till then. And then you've got to see how do you now pivot from here and do something else altogether with a different mindset. And Prachi, in my case, I think acquiring myself a coach personally, in 2016 has really helped me pivot and catapult and look at my life and look at myself very differently, So I would give this piece of advice to everyone.
Yes, having a coach is absolutely a mentor, a sponsor is so very important. And here comes one more question, and we have a few minutes. So, if you could please answer that, Usha, when you feel excluded at work, what should you do?
On a lighter note, I would say just go have a cup of coffee. But on a serious note, I think, and this has happened a few times over, right? So it may happen sometimes with an unconscious bias that, somebody just ignores you. It's important that you get into the discussion and say, hey, I'm there, and these are things that I can do. Don't remain a silent background wallpaper. Just go in and say, I'm a part of this team and I believe I can do a set of these things. Because most of us as women have found, and I would do that earlier as well, is if you kind of get excluded, you just say, okay, let me just, let it pass and maybe my turn will come later. Believe me, in the corporate world, if you don't ask for it, you don't get it. So it's very important to go back, raise your hand, and say, I can do it. Then you will also get to know sometimes exclusion is intentional because your capability, or there's a little bit of doubt in your capability, ability, or whatever. So go make that entry in, a bold entry in, and say, I want to contribute, I want to be a part of this, and literally fight for your rights is what I would say, Prachi. And I've done that often.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I've seen you do that. And taking charge of your own life is what stays with me out of your message. Thank you very much. Dipali, would you like to talk about how can I become aware of my own biases? And this is, I promise, the last question.
No, I think acquire a coach. I think that's extremely important. Read the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, is a very important one because when you're examining yourself is when you discuss your old biases. Listen to my podcast, Being CEO with Dipali Nair, 35 different journeys of 35 leaders, and what they say to themselves when they fail, and what they say to themselves when they succeed and how they've looked at their lives. And of course, tips and tricks. So I would say that, do that, put yourself into the shoes of 35 different people and you would examine, biases and read. I think reading different books, ideologies helps dramatically.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And with that, we really come to the end of the discussion. And Usha and Dipali, I want to say to you that you're both the role models, not just for IBM, but the country we breathe in, the community we breathe in, the society we breathe in. You're really somebody we can learn from, and it sort of encourages us to do more, do expanded roles, and really negotiate our role at homes too. So thank you very much for your presence, and to the audience who's live today with us and who will listen to the replay. Best wishes to you to start your journey, to accelerate your journey in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
And Prachi, I just want to say this, let the discussion not end here. I'm, of course, available on Twitter @Dipali Nair. Nair is spelled with a double A. Let's continue the discussion there. I think this is a very important dialogue, on diversity and inclusion, different aspects of it. So the discussion doesn't end here.
Absolutely.
It only begins now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Usha. Thank you, Dipali.
Thank you. Bye.